If there is anything that needs to be satirized and remixed, it is Trump talking about massive dumps. And by the way, extra points, if you can sample Trump saying massive dumps and me talking about it in a song, please do it.
Dumps. Big massive dumps. Dumps. Big massive dumps. Dumps.
Dumps. Dumps. Dump, dump, dumps. Dumps. Dump.
Dumps. Dumps.
Dumps. Dumps. Dump, dump, dumps. Dumps. Dump.
Dump. Big massive dumps. Dumps.
Dumps. Dumps.
Sir, you just
Dump,
won.
dump, dumps. Dumps. Dump.
Dump. Big massive dumps.
Donald Trump insisted multiple times that it was massive dumps that led him to lose the election, which is just
on another level, on another level.
Thank your lucky stars every day you're not Dave Pagnon. Oh, look at those eyes, man. That dude is gone. That is a freaking predator right there. Who thinks he's smarter than you, thinks he's better than you, and he's gonna beat you, he thinks. Oh, Joe Rogan.
Trump was doing this with his personal toilet.
But sinks, toilets, and showers.
Elements of bathrooms.
10 times, 15 times.
Elements of bathrooms.
We're looking very strongly at sinks and showers.
Elements of bathrooms.
10 times, 15 times.
Elements of bathrooms.
What on earth is going on with Trump and toilets? Trump's White House toilet would be clogged. With documents that Donald Trump was flushing down the toilet. Is this the explanation? Is this the explanation?
Big massive dumps.
Elements of bathrooms.
10 times, 15 times.
Okay, all right, guys. You can be damn sure that when Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine, he will allow no low-flow toilets. Those are for sissy boys and betas. They are going to be all power flushers. That you can be sure of. Putin would not have any less than that. We are standing by for a very important press briefing from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, which will start shortly. If you need to be brought up to speed, as the case may be, on what's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I don't want to kind of like reset everything from the top, but we just published this clip, and you can tell from the gesture I'm making in the video that it's like a really engaging video. And I basically bring you up to speed to now. And if you watch this at 1.5x, it'll only take you about 7 minutes, and then you will be fully caught up on what's going on. The clip is called Breaking Russia Invades Ukraine, and you can see this on our YouTube channel right now. But we are now standing by for a White House press briefing. I imagine the vast majority of the questions will be about the situation in Russia and Ukraine. Jen Psaki will be joined by the Deputy National Security Advisor, and that is starting momentarily. So it's great to have everybody back, standing by, standing back, and standing forward, and all of these different things. We have an incredibly powerful super chat from Joseph Dinzies, who says, "Hey, David, love from Ukraine. I have come over from Israel to support Ukrainian independence from Russian imperialism. Good to see you are not a part of the tanky left who have been on the side of Russia. Wish me well. Thanks." Wow. About 4 or 5 different layers of drama just in that one super chat. There's a lot happening there. Be safe, Joseph. Hope you're well. JD Straight Shot says, "What will war with Russia do to the price of mangoes, art, uncharged pickles, and Trump's re-election prospects?" I assume everything will go up in price, and quickly. Very, 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 very quickly. Okay, let's get right into things. Thanks to Jen here and Merkelist, as well as Oscar Ounds and AJ4AU. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kicking us off over on Twitch. We have a lot is happening today. It's hard to even keep track of everything that's happening. And remember, we do have the coupon code on our website. Please don't war. Please don't war. Which you can use to sign up with a discount. Okay, let's go right into a bunch of different things that I have. First, this is a brief departure, just as it's kind of a for the lulz moment. Yesterday, Kyle Rittenhouse, famous only for killing a few people. I mean, quite literally, that's the only thing that he is that he is known for, and providing medico. He has launched an organization called the Media Accountability Project, which I guess will sue media outlets. Look at this clip. It's perfect. He doesn't even know what they're going to do. He starts chugging water and at one point looks off to the side. You couldn't, if this were a skit, it would be indistinguishable. Look at this.
Forward. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on tonight. I can't think of many people who've been at the receiving end of this much sinister lying from so-called news organizations as you have. How are you going to respond?
Yeah.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Me and my team have decided to...
By the way, he has a team now. That's. I'd love to meet who's on the team. Something tells me, like, they don't exactly have Phil Jackson as equivalent as the coach, you know?
Launch the Media Accountability Project as a tool to help fundraise and hold the media accountable for the lies they said and deal with them in court.
Interesting. So the idea is maybe like the Covington Catholic kids.
Right. The water chug and the look to the side is just unbelievably perfect.
So the idea is maybe like the Covington Catholic kids. You will be suing news organizations that maliciously lie about people who are in the news. Is that the plan?
Yes, sir. We're going to be holding them accountable, Tucker.
Tucker's as confused as Kyle. It's not clear that either of them know what they're going to be doing with TMAP.
Do you...
Someone's got to be taking advantage of this kid, right? Like, I mean, he doesn't have any idea what they're doing. He just has no clue whatsoever what it is that they've launched. But they're certainly going to be holding the media accountable. Thanks to Steven Sirk, who just signed up on my website with the coupon code OBAMNA.
Obama.
You were new member number 6 today. I really appreciate that. I also want to say thanks to NZN8 for the Twitch Prime subscription. You are number 7 today, and I really appreciate that as well. I appreciate everybody. More super chats coming in. Shekels Mac says only Obama. Patrick Riley says you can't get mini dills in Massachusetts. Never mind your bag of mango. Mini dill pickles? I don't know. Growing up in Massachusetts, we had no shortage of dills, that's for sure. Oh, also, thanks to Irie Man for gifting somebody a sub over on Twitch. I really do appreciate that. Okay, let's continue as we stand by here. Here is just a brief sampling of what people in Florida who favor the Don't Say Gay bill are saying. I, in all seriousness, maybe don't let kids see this. Okay, here's a sampling of some of the defiant and principled support for the Don't Say Gay bill.
Children in kindergarten do not need to hear about 100 different sexual orientations, sexual preferences in reality, and gender identities.
Our children are not and should not.
Oh, God, she had to be from Boston. Dear God, what is she doing down in Florida?
Gender identities.
Our children are not and should not be part of a social experiment.
This can only be known as indoctrination.
Should teachers tell children, pick a gender, any gender, you'll be happy? Do we say lie, cheat, kill, steal, you'll be happy?
NLBGQT issue.
NLBGQ. You guys be careful there, okay? That's NLBGQ.
Jews. Children can be traumatized by
NLBGQ. You'll be happy.
Or NLBGQT issues. Children can be
NLBGQT. NLBGQT. That's got to be some kind of Wordle mass, like quadruple word score. What are the letters again?
Be happy.
NLBGQT issues. Children can be traumatized by these
NLBGQT.
non-biblical issues.
I can tell you what's inappropriate is a man in a Speedo talking about sex to class.
And we will ban men.
Or a drag queen coming into an elementary school.
Oh, my God. So anyway, those are some of the people who want the Don't Say Gay bill. And they are very much. Now, was she in favor or against NLBGQT? Dear God. And she was reading, right? That's what's even crazier. She read that. You should have a coupon code coupon. All right, maybe. We'll look into that. I want to say thanks to Veronica Sigcho, who just signed up on my website with the code Please Don't War. Aiden Strange just signed up with the coupon code WOW22. And Leah Sutton just signed up with the code Please Don't War at joinpacman.com. Also want to say thank you to Weslow and Cameratageous for the Twitch Prime subscriptions today, numbers 12 and 13. Okay, I did mention that yesterday we had to drop the ban on dozens, quite literally dozens of people who were just in an incredibly weaponized way trolling our live stream. A lot of pro-Putin people just going absolutely crazy. Some of them have asked to be unbanned, and I'm going to adjudicate those unbans right now. User contender number showed up yesterday and said, "It's sad to see how some weak men have love for strongman Putin." Okay, that's a good comment. That's fair. Then said, "Erdogan loves feet." It's a little weird. "We are all going to die, run. Wake up, Joe. If woman for many sex before end of world." Wow, that's like one of the, those articles written like celebrity net worth articles. There's some written about me and it's like they're barely coherent. It's like, is David Pakman of gay? If woman for many sex before end of world. They were banned. And then their unban request was hard to find something more pathetic than being a Twitch moderator. I guess that's a permaban. I would have probably unbanned them, except their unban request was toxic. User Hello People showed up yesterday and said in all caps, "I know you're gonna ban Demai, but uphold the People's Republic of Donetsk and Lugansk. U.S. imperialism taking L's as well as Nazi friends Pakman. F you and F Nazi NATO." They were banned. Their unban request is uphold the People's Republic of Donetsk and Lugansk. U.S. imperialism. Okay, David Pakman, you libtard cuck. That's going to be a permaban. Okay. By the way, if you're wondering why this is broken, it's from so many people that I've banned. It literally, every time, pieces of it are crumbling off like a brittle egg. User American Nacho showed up and did all caps, "Let's go Brandon." That's not allowed, so they were banned. And then their unban request is, "Really? You're really falling off, bro. I'm a right winger, but I used to like your moderate takes." My takes were never moderate. I don't know what year you're referring to. And "Let's go Brandon" is not allowed. You're gone. That was weird. That was a very strange noise on that last one. And lastly, user Raving Mage says, "Joe is so incompetent, he's failing on COVID. Maybe if Mark Milley was studying something other than white rage, he would have been able to stop this historic failure from Biden. Biden is such a failure." So this person was really mostly banned because they were rapid firing messages. Then said, "I broke no rules, please unban." I will unban them. It was mostly just to give them a timeout. Okay, here we go. There we go. So that's okay. I'll allow them back. And, okay, we did that. And then thanks to JT Dagnino and a Danish joint for the Twitch Prime subscriptions, numbers 14 and 15. We are standing by for a press briefing from Jen Psaki and the Deputy National Security Advisor, Dileep Singh. Any moment now, they're expected. There is an invasion of Ukraine happening right now. Many what we might call revolutionary leftists have apologized, saying they were wrong to write off Putin's threats and massing of 190,000 troops at the Ukrainian border. They've said, no, it was aggression. It was aggression. Tony says, hello from Tbilisi, Georgia, David, sending a super chat as a thank you for being one of the few reasonable YouTubers. It was disheartening to see a lot of American left-wing victim blame and side with Russia in the last few weeks. Yes, it is weird. YL says, I'm Ukrainian from Dnipro, and I think Putin is a dictator and the aggressor, but I do feel sympathy for people who don't want to be part of this country. Sure. Okay. Let's continue with some other things. Okay, so we did this. So Trump gave, I'm not going to call, so we've been calling them febrile screeds lately. We need a different term. I don't want to call Trump's declarations febrile screeds anymore. What else might we be able to call them? Any ideas? Maybe weaponized rants. I don't really know. Anyway, Trump is very impressed with Vladimir Putin's smart invasion of Ukraine. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it in the transcript. Okay, check this out. Oh, it's right at the is it at the beginning? No, it's not. Let's see if we can find the piece of it.
The millions of people, not 2 million or 1 million like they say. I say 10 million.
Let's see where we are.
Millions of people are bum rushing our country. And many of these people come from prisons. They're
okay, here we go.
Out.
This is going to be good.
127 countries now they have. But many of these countries are emptying their prisons like we're a dumping ground right into our country. I've never seen anything like it. I don't think our country has ever been so low. You could take the 5 worst presidents in the history of our country and put them together. I don't think they've done the damage that this administration has done.
Okay, here we go.
In the last 24 hours, we know Russia has said that they are recognizing 2 breakaway regions of Ukraine. And now this White House is stating that this is an invasion. That's a strong word. What went wrong here? What has the current occupant of the Oval Office done that he could have done differently?
Well, what went wrong was a rigged election. What went wrong is a candidate that shouldn't be there and a man that has no concept of what he's doing. I went in yesterday and there was a television screen and I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right. No, but think of it. Here's a guy who's very savvy. I know him very well. Very, very well. By the way, this never would have happened with us.
Guys, he's super impressed. He's so impressed with Putin. Now, I understand that some people are saying it sort of sounds like sarcasm. He's being sarcastic about the idea that it's a peacekeeping force. Trump recognizes it's not a peacekeeping force. But what's funny is they're sort of being critical of the fact that it's being called an invasion, but he's recognizing that it is an invasion. But he's clearly smitten with Putin. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. He says we need Russian tanks on our border to stop Mexicans from getting in. It's stunning. Stunning. And there's tons of this stuff. So we're going to look at this very, very closely tomorrow. We're monitoring what's going on in Ukraine. Now, as many of you, I'm sure, would agree with me, whenever there's a geopolitical conflict, whenever things get complicated, difficult, when I need moral clarity and strength of character and decisiveness, I immediately think, what is Tulsi Gabbard thinking about this issue? That's immediately where my mind goes. And she had the following to say to Sean Hannity.
the world that we live in and not the world that maybe some people wished existed. And that reality is Putin has made very clear all along that their security in his mind is what's at stake here. And they do not want to see
I don't want to interrupt you,
U.S.
but
and NATO
Putin
troops
also said Ukraine is not a country. And he has been saying this going back many, many years. So this has been, these territorial ambitions have existed a long time.
When Sean Hannity weaponized, delusional, nuclear propagandist goes, Tulsi, you might be going a little too far with the Putin apologia. You know you've gone off the rails. You're completely off the rails when Hannity's like, I would pump the brakes a little, Tulsi, on some of this Russian propaganda. Unbelievable. And remember, this is the last real liberal, guys. She's a true liberal because she's against wars, supposedly. Unbelievable stuff. This is on my podcast today as well. So definitely check that out. The market's reacting, not surprisingly, very negatively to what's going on, down another 1.4%. Basically, this means I'm going to have to work an extra 2 years. This war is delaying my retirement by 2 years. No, I'm kidding. I mean, obviously, as many of you know, I hold stocks and bonds like many people, and I don't touch them. I don't trade. I'm not doing anything. I'm just waiting. But by the way, if you do want my market insights, I will be publishing some of them to my TikToks. Some of you might know we are approaching 75,000 TikToks followers. And I will be answering finance questions, including, should I sell everything? Hint, the answer is no. Over on my TikToks, which is very, very quickly going crazy, you might have seen, where was it? I did one recording. Windy. It was extremely windy, as you can see. And sometimes, no matter how windy it is, I still record my TikToks. So that's just something to think about and something to be aware of in case you like different types of content. Okay? So that's that. So we can close this out. Blinken says, Blinken and Ukrainian foreign minister briefing report. Oh, hold on, let's listen.
This is our third or fourth encounter in the last 4 days. And this speaks for the dynamics and the quality of our relationship, but also for the urgency of the current crisis that needs to be handled.
Right.
We meet at a very tense and responsible time for Ukraine, for the United States, and for the world. We all are at a critical juncture for the security of Europe, as well as international.
My guess is Psaki's waiting for this to finish, so let's watch. We'll keep an eye.
Russian aggression has brought the world to the edge of the largest catastrophe since World War II. Yesterday, President Putin moved to recognize 2 pieces of Ukrainian land as independent entities. Ukraine does not and will never recognize this absurdity. Neither will the world recognize it. In fact, what Putin recognized is not the so-called Donetsk People Republic and Lugansk People Republic. He recognized his direct responsibility for the war against Ukraine and an unprovoked and unjustified war on another sovereign state in Europe, which Russia now intensifies. President Putin killed Minsk agreements. And more broadly, he attacked the world order. Needless to say, Russia's move is a grave breach of international law and a new act of aggression against Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Therefore, Ukraine strongly believes that the time for sanctions is now. And in this context, we welcome today's announcement of sanctions by President Biden. The world must respond with all its economic might to punish Russia for the crimes it has already committed and ahead of the crimes it plans to commit. Hit Russia's economy now and hit it hard.
Ooh.
I commend immense efforts of the US diplomacy, led by Tony, to mobilize the global coalition of allies and partners to stop Russia. The entire world stands today with Ukraine, and rightly so. Putin wants much more than a war-torn piece of Ukrainian land and people living there. What stops him is only our unity and resolve, and we can still stop him. Ukraine continues the engagement with the United States, EU, and NATO in diplomatic efforts to ease tensions. Yet, we also stand ready for any possible development. We had a focused discussion today with Secretary Blinken on steps to protect Ukraine and our multidimensional resilience. One of the proposals that we put forward today is designing a program similar to the Lend-Lease implemented during the World War II to support the war efforts of the allies in Europe. Wow. This program will help to ensure sustainability and will improve efficiency in strengthening the capacity of Ukraine to defend itself. The last point that I would like to make, today we discussed some very specific ideas, and we appreciate very concrete steps made by the United States. These days we receive proposals from some countries to condemn Russia's behavior, to condemn but not follow the condemnation with action. And I would like to say that condemnations are important, but it's actions that really matter now, these days. And I'm grateful to our strategic partner, the United States, for its ironclad support, including military, economic, and political, diplomatic assistance provided to Ukraine. The Ukrainian people will surely remember the United States standing with Ukraine at this decisive moment in history. Thank you.
We'll now turn to questions, and we'll take two from each delegation. We'll start with Vivian Salama of the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, President Biden said 3 days ago that if Russia invades, they will have chosen war and the door to diplomacy will be closed. Today, however, he seemed to have left the door open for diplomacy despite labeling what Russia has done as an invasion. And so even though you've now canceled your meeting with Minister Lavrov, can you say what the circumstances would entail to justify talks at this point, absent, say, a full withdrawal?
Good question.
Does the actions in Donbass kind of open the door for potential negotiations? And on that point, if you would both indulge me with two questions. President Putin today also said that the crisis could be resolved if Kiev promised to abandon future efforts to join NATO. And so that's been a non-starter for the West. So what needs to happen then for any of these talks to actually be entertained? Minister Kuleba, good to see you again. Quick questions for you. Does the Ukrainian government have any plans to evacuate Mariupol or Kharkiv in the coming days, just given the events that we've seen in Donbass? And secondly, the United States has informed the United Nations of credible information showing that Moscow has compiled a list of Ukrainians to be killed or sent to camps following a military occupation. Were you informed of this list? Your government, was it informed of this list? And have any actions been taken to respond to it? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to start. First, the further renewed Russian invasion of Ukraine that has now begun means clearly that the idea of having a meeting this week with Foreign Minister Lavrov to pursue diplomacy now rejected by Russia, does not make sense. But having said that, to the extent there is anything that we can do to avert an even worse case scenario, an all-out assault on all of Ukraine, including its capital, that would inflict horrific costs on the Ukrainian people, we will always pursue that. So we, our partners, remain open to diplomacy, but Moscow needs to demonstrate that it's serious. The last 24 hours it's demonstrated just the opposite. It hasn't been serious to date, including with regard to the meeting that was planned for Thursday. We made clear that in the context of a Russian invasion, we would not go forward with that meeting. If Moscow's approach changes, I remain very much prepared to engage. With regard to President Putin's statement about NATO and the open door, it's very clear what we've seen in the last 24 hours that this has never been about Ukraine and NATO per se. What President Putin has made clear is that this is about the total subjugation of Ukraine to Russia. It's about reconstituting the Russian Empire, or short of that, a sphere of influence, or short of that, the total neutrality of countries surrounding Russia. And so the issue of Ukraine and NATO has really been an argument, an excuse to mask the fact that what this is about is President Putin's view that Ukraine is not a sovereign country, that it does not have an existence or independence, not associated in some fashion with Russia. A proposition that we not only firmly reject, but so does virtually every Ukrainian.
I can only reiterate what the Secretary just said on NATO. NATO is a choice of the people of Ukraine. No one but Ukraine and NATO will decide on the future of our relationship. And it has never been about NATO for Putin. It's just an excuse. Even if we do nothing, President Putin will find a reason to accuse us of doing something. Regarding our plans to evacuate Mariupol or Kharkiv, no, we do not have such plans. We have two plans. Plan A is to utilize every tool of diplomacy to deter Russia and prevent further escalation. And if that fails, Plan B is to fight for every inch of our land and every city and every village. To fight until we win, of course. And about the list of extermination, no, we haven't received it officially. But I wouldn't exclude that such a list can exist.
We'll turn to Olga Koshelenko from 1+1 Media.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary of State. From your perspective, is Budapest Memorandum rather alive or dead? And do the United States recognize any legal obligations under it? And quick follow-up to Mr. Kuleba, what actions do you expect from partners to be taken under Budapest? Thank you.
Good question.
Well, in effect, Russia began to tear up the Budapest Memorandum in 2014 when it seized Crimea and went into the Donbass, leading, backing, financing, supporting the separatists and waging war in the Donbass. I think what we've seen in the last 24 hours is the further repudiation of Budapest by Russia. For our part, we have worked very hard over many years, and especially over the last year, to do everything we can to support Ukraine, to support its territorial integrity, its sovereignty, its independence, through security assistance, in the last year alone, more than in any previous year, humanitarian assistance, financial assistance. Just about 10 days ago, we provided an additional loan guarantee of $1 billion to Ukraine. And of course, leading the effort internationally to build support for Ukraine in this hour of need. So we stand very much behind that support expressed in the Budapest Memorandum, and doing everything that we can to uphold Ukraine's independence, its security, its well-being.
Budapest Memorandum is not a collective defense treaty. So the truth is that no one promised us that they would fight for us if we are attacked. This is not the subject matter of the Budapest Memorandum. But this document was concluded on the premise that, first, countries who provided security assurances to Ukraine will themselves not use force against us. And second, if that happens, they will do their utmost to stop it. So this is exactly should be the subject of the consultations that Ukraine has initiated recently. Countries who belong to this legal and political field space created by the Budapest Memorandum have to come together and reach an agreement on which specific action can they take to protect Ukraine. We understand that one of the signatories of the Budapest Memorandum is Russia,
right,
who, as Secretary Blinken rightly said, violated all possible international documents and agreements. But this does not waive other countries of their responsibilities to do their best in order to help Ukraine. Ukraine is a country that exists in a security vacuum. This is truth. Our security guarantees are Ukrainian army and Ukrainian diplomacy. But we realize that. But we do believe that the decisions taken in 1994, when the Budapest Memorandum was concluded, they should be respected because we sacrificed a lot to make a long story short, we did a lot to strengthen global security by abandoning our nuclear arsenal. That was a huge contribution. And we expect, on the principle of reciprocity, an equally huge contribution to ensuring Ukraine's security.
Ben Hall, Fox News.
Thank you. Thank you very much both for this today. Foreign Minister, there is a suggestion that what we've seen so far is a minor invasion, that there's more to come, and so it only warrants sort of lesser US sanctions. I wonder if that is your read as well. And also, you and President Zelensky called for tough sanctions to be placed on Russia before the invasion. You said this would happen. If not, it has happened. Are you happy with that in mind, with the way the US has handled this? What more would you like to see from the US and from the international community to try and deter more aggression? And Secretary Blinken, thank you. Given that Russia has invaded Ukraine, regardless of all the threats of harsh sanctions, the attempts at diplomacy, what makes you think that continuing down the same path is going to deter them any further? Do you think it's time to change tact? Do you think diplomacy has failed? And secondly, have you underestimated Putin?
First, there is no such thing as minor, middle, or major invasion.
Right.
Invasion is an invasion.
Beautiful.
Second, as I said earlier, we do appreciate the sanctions which were announced today. They target Russia. They're very specific. They are painful. I can say frankly that yesterday, when we learned about the first executive order to impose sanctions related to economic activities in the Donetsk, with Donetsk and Lugansk, we were puzzled because we saw how the side that thought recognition from Russia is being punished.
Right.
But we didn't see how Russia, who granted its recognition, is
Our
punished.
analysis yesterday.
But we saw it today.
Right.
And this strategy of imposing sanctions by waves, if I may put it this way, is something that can work if it continues in a sustainable way. President Putin should not have a single minute when he starts to think that this is the threshold, this is the ceiling, the pressure reached its ceiling, and he will not be punished anymore. This pressure should continue to be stepped up, and if that involves regular issuance of executive orders on new sanctions, we will be more than happy to see that. I will repeat again.
If they seriously, in a concerted effort, froze all oligarch assets in the US and Europe, do you know how quickly these corrupt dudes who got rich thanks to Putin would go to Putin and say, you got to cut this crap right away, right away.
And keep mounting pressure on him. The question is that he has a certain table on his mind, which I'm not aware of, but I'm sure he has it. And we should also understand that every next decision should be taken in a swift action. And we saw 2 executive orders issued by President Biden within, less than 24 hours. This may be the dynamics that will have to be upheld if Russia continues to escalate. And it was encouraging to hear from Secretary a very simple sentence: if Russia escalates, the United States and partners will escalate sanctions. This is exactly the rule that has to be followed. And yes, we did believe that it would be helpful for some of sanctions, not all of sanctions, but some of sanctions to be imposed before the invasion begins as a preemptive measure for what Russia had done before. But this question becomes obsolete now. And we have to focus on a different strategy, the one that I just described.
Ben, it's hard for me to improve much on my friend Dimitro's answer. I'll just add a couple of things. First, all along we said that we were pursuing 2 tracks. The track of diplomacy and dialogue to try to persuade Russia not to engage in...
A lot of anti-Semitism in the chat, people getting very, very strongly banned and quickly. Good job, moderators.
Building up defense and building a response.
I like, is the anti-Semitism against me or against Blinken? It's not even really clear. I guess both.
Diplomacy and dialogue, and instead to pursue aggression. As a consequence, we have started to pursue the severe consequences that we've made clear would follow from any renewed Russian aggression. Today, faced with the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we started high and will stay high. The sanctions that we've already announced go well beyond what we did in 2014. Full blocking sanctions against 2 of Russia's largest financial institutions, VEB and the military bank. These institutions hold more than $80 billion in assets. They provide key services that are critical to financing the Kremlin and Russian military. Right. We have comprehensive sanctions against Russian sovereign debt. What that means is that we're cutting off the Russian government from Western financing. Sanctions on elites and family members, and as promised, as we've said all along, Germany taking action on Nord Stream 2. And to repeat what Dmitro just emphasized, we've also made clear, we're making clear today, that if Russia continues to escalate, so will we. And of course, it's not only the sanctions and other measures of that nature that are being taken. It is, as we've made clear, the reinforcement of NATO and its eastern flank, and continuing to provide and indeed increase the support that we're providing to Ukraine against every dimension, security, diplomatic, political, economic, humanitarian. All of that is in the mix. Ultimately, President Putin...
By the way, for people wondering, it's very clear that they've delayed the press briefing until this one is done, so we shouldn't miss anything.
But, as I've said all along, whatever his decisions, we're prepared either way, and we've demonstrated that again today in full coordination with allies and partners.
Have you underestimated him?
Oh, I think to the contrary. We've not underestimated him. We've actually laid out for the world his entire playbook, a playbook that he is now following and is making a very...
Does RT still exist in English? Like, what are they? I haven't even come across anything from RT in years. Are they doing Putin apologia, or like what's going on RT?
Putin all along.
We'll take a final question from Dmytro Anopchenko from Inter TV.
Mr. Blinken, I'm interested in your opinion about Normandy format. After all what happened in Ukraine last night, may one tell that it will not work anymore and should be replaced like Ukraine proposed? And secondly, I got a question which may sound very naive, but it's a question of my audience in Ukraine, millions of people who are really scared. And if any one of them will be on my place, they will ask you, if Russian troops will move forward, or if they will start intense artillery fire hitting Ukrainian territory, on your understanding, what will happen next, and what will America do?
Thank you. With regard to the Normandy format, I think the question is best directed at President Putin.
Right.
As far as we can see by the actions that he's taken, he's rejected it, and he's torn up, in effect, the Minsk agreements, which the Normandy format was designed to advance. So if Russia is at all serious about resolving the conflict that it created in the Donbass, pursuant to the agreements it signed, the Minsk agreements.
In the chat, let me know, does this entire thing last more than 3 weeks or less than 3 weeks?
The Normandy format all along, with France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia working to implement the agreements. And throughout,
looking good.
Ukraine has worked very hard to make good on its commitments. Russia's done just the opposite. But what we've seen now in the last 24 hours would seem to be the final repudiation of Minsk by Russia. But again, you would have to ask President Putin. With regard to what comes next, as I said a moment ago, and as we've said all along,
will there be a pro-Putin, pro-Russia portion of CPAC coming up this week?
It will face the massive consequences that not only the United States, but virtually all of our allies and partners have made clear would follow. You've heard this from the G7, the leading democratic economies in the world. You've heard it from the European Union. You've heard it from NATO. And that includes what we've started with today, and that is very severe economic and financial sanctions that will exact significant costs from Russia. It includes a reinforcement of NATO and the defense of all allies in NATO. And it includes additional assistance to Ukraine in every area, security, diplomatic, political, economic, humanitarian. All of that will follow. And again, I repeat what I've said before, if and as Russia escalates, so will we.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
So that is the end of a briefing involving Anthony Blinken and the Ukrainian foreign minister, who is strongly masked, very, very strongly masked. And we are now standing by for Jen Psaki and the Deputy National Security Advisor. They are going to take many questions any minute now. And I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting things taking place there. If you're just joining us, welcome. We're continuing coverage of the technically, it's slow, small, limited, very polite invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which started yesterday. I want to say thank you to Sir Spam Assum, The Teal Appeal, Donatello, Scientific, and Hippie Chick for the Twitch Prime subscriptions. I really appreciate that. I want to remind you guys, I once read on an internet a report which said, by the way, guys, that was a joke. People saying I'm downplaying the invasion. That was sarcasm, guys. That was sarcasm. Oh my God, I can't even joke on this show. I've read that 90% of Twitch viewers have Amazon Prime, and only 10% use their free Twitch Prime subscription. Okay, if that's true, that means 800 people currently watching on Twitch could subscribe for free with Twitch Prime right now and take some Bezos bucks away from Bezos and send them to us. That's what I've been told. Okay? So this would be a great day for that. I also want to say thank you to David Casey and the great Jared Netifi, who have signed up on my website, joinpacman.com, using the coupon code OBAMNA. You can also use the coupon code Please Don't War. Please don't war. We don't want that. Oh, wow. Thanks to Kaiserfu, Hozal, and Charlie301 for the Twitch Prime subscriptions. I really appreciate that. Miko from Finland, if I recall correctly, says, please consider English-speaking correspondent from Ukraine on your show. Would love that. Would love that. By the way, I have 3 announcements of programming notes to make for everybody. Programming note number 1. I will be live with CPAC starting Thursday evening. We are expecting to hear from great conservative speakers. It is, after all, the Conservative Political Action Conference. We are going to hear from such conservative luminaries as Tulsi, Don Jr., Don Sr., and other conservative luminaries at CPAC. We will be live with that starting on Thursday night. Monday, I will deliver the State of the David Pakman Show address. And of course, that is because on Tuesday, a week from today, Joe Biden will deliver his State of the Union. We will be live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook with Biden's State of the Union 1 week from today. We will start about an hour before. So a ton of live content coming up. And last but not least, this is really, what is this? I see that. It's very strange. I apologize for that. It's a very strange, I don't know what that is. There we go. That's better. Yeah. We will then be this is incredible. The truckers are planning a convoy from, I guess, California to D.C. this weekend to protest non-existent mandates. We are going to have an embedded correspondent with the truckers, guys, with the truckers. Your support funds all of that stuff. Okay? So that is going to be something wild. Something wild. And thank you to M. Nelson, the Mike Lennon, Giver of Life, Conga Wonga, Big Fat Pat, Ketwertito, Soul Knife, Gambling Gargoyle, Michael C. Stone, Danish Selt, Flatulence, that's clever, Scroot Scamander. Whoa. Wow. All of whom just signed up via Twitch Prime, putting us at 34. I appreciate that. That shudder startled me. That was crazy. A lot of content coming. Yes, absolutely. So let's just run through a couple other things. Stocks very, very hard down, as we would say. Charlie Kirk is blaming... Charlie Kirk... Hold on, what's happening? Charlie Kirk says, basically, Putin is just going places where he's welcome.
Why does Putin feel so empowered? The entire Western world is putting sanctions right now on Russia, as they call this an invasion. Very well might be. I'm not the person to determine whether or not this is an invasion or an annexation. It feels as if Putin is going into places that want him.
Yeah, guys, Putin's going places where they're welcoming him. I mean, come on. What's the big deal here? That's a hot take from Charlie Kirk. Really, really something else. Other super chats coming in. David, this doesn't mean to be a loaded question. Why is your take on this war so drastically different than Hassan? I have no idea. I can only tell you why I believe what I believe. I see no serious explanation as to why Putin would not be the aggressor here. Putin is deciding that the borders, which are supposed to be respected on the basis of the... Okay. Let's listen. This is going to be a big deal here.
Okay. Oh, back by popular demand. Just a few days after his first engagement with us. Dilip is here. He is going to give some brief remarks at the top about the sanctions announcement today. He has a hard out, so he's only going to be able to take a few questions today, but I
have a hard in, here, so which was an hour ago when we started.
Russia's long previewed invasion of Ukraine has begun, and so too has our response. Today, the president responded swiftly and in lockstep with allies and partners. The speed and coordination was historic. In previous sanctions regimes, it took weeks and months to mount a decisive response. This time, we announced our first tranche of sanctions in less than a day.
Big tranche.
And in lockstep with allies and partners in the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, and Australia.
Right.
Let me say a few words about the details of the package. First.
Is there a baby in there?
Hello. There's no easy segue from that. Close your ears. First, after consultations overnight with Germany, Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline will not become operational.
Canceled.
That's an $11 billion investment in a prized gas pipeline controlled by Russia that will now go to waste. And it sacrifices what would have been a cash cow for Russia's coffers. But it's not just about the money. This decision will relieve Russia's geostrategic chokehold over Europe through its supply of gas, and it's a major turning point in the world's energy independence from Russia. Second, we've demonstrated the potency of our financial sanctions. And make no mistake, this is only the sharp edge of the pain we can inflict. In lockstep with our allies, we're fully blocking from the global financial system the fifth largest Russian financial institution, VEB. This is a glorified piggy bank for the Kremlin that holds more than $50 billion in assets.
Right.
We're also fully blocking Promvaya's bank. This is a bank that holds $35 billion in assets that finances the activities of the Russian military. In plain English, full block means these banks can no longer make any transactions with the US, nor with Europe, as Europe matched our actions, and their assets in our respective financial systems will be frozen. And let me be totally clear, no Russian financial institution is safe if the invasion proceeds. Right. We are ready to press a button to take action on the two largest Russian financial institutions, which collectively hold almost $750 billion in assets, or more than half of the total in the Russian banking system. Third, together with our allies, we've also cut off the Russian government, the Russian central bank, and Russian sovereign wealth funds from new financing from the US and Europe. The Kremlin can no longer raise money from the US or Europe, and its new debt can no longer trade on US or European financial markets. Fourth, we've fully sanctioned a group of Russian elites and their family members. These individuals share in the corrupt gains of the Kremlin, and they will now share in the pain. Other Russian elites and their family members are now on notice that additional actions could be taken on them as well.
Big time stuff.
I also want to take a minute to address a key part of the president's speech on energy markets. We were deliberate to direct the pain of our sanctions towards the Russian economy, not ours. None of our measures are designed to disrupt the flow of energy to global markets, and we are now executing a plan in coordination with major oil producers and major oil consumers to secure the stability.
I assume that's a message to stock traders for tomorrow.
Started. This was the beginning of an invasion, and this is the beginning of our response. The actions we took today were only the first tranche. If Putin escalates further, we will escalate further, using financial sanctions and export controls, which we've yet to unveil, but which are fully prepared to implement with allies and partners across the world. Lastly, make no mistake, our response goes well beyond sanctions and export controls. We're continuing to fortify NATO's eastern flank to reinforce a sacred Article 5 commitment to defend every inch of NATO territory. Just today, the president announced that additional troops and equipment will be shifted within Europe to the Baltics. We'll continue to provide defensive assistance to Ukraine already over the past.
Yeah, this is a proxy war, guys. We have to be able to say that. You don't have to judgmentally say it, but it is a proxy war.
Assistance to Ukraine. With the idea being we want to create a successful alternative in Ukraine to Russian-style kleptocracy, which may be Putin's greatest.
It's a war in all ways other than American troops on the ground. That's what it is.
Let's speak a little bit more about the energy component. What tools do you have in the tool chest, given that there's been an effort ongoing now for several months to control the price increases that we're seeing for gasoline in particular? What can you do to help energy prices not bite the way that President Biden appears to worry that they will?
Yeah. So this is an ongoing effort and a sensitive effort. I can give you a bit of detail on what that involves. Number one, it involves coordinating our actions with major energy producers. We all have reserves at our disposal, and those reserves could help support the supply of energy worldwide. Number two, we're working closely with major energy producers. Several of them have the spare capacity to provide supply to global energy markets and to balance the market in the event of any supply disruption. Number three, we can work with energy companies to surge their capacity to supply energy to the market, particularly as prices rise. And number four, we can be very clear that if President Putin weaponizes energy supply, it will be met with massive consequences, and it will only accelerate the diversification of Europe and the world away from Russian energy.
Can you speak quickly to the decision to what seems to be delinking the sanctions? Initially, the president was signaling if there is an invasion or a further invasion, that the sanctions would come full stop, one swoop. Now we're seeing sort of more of a tit-for-tat approach. You're warning here today that President Putin goes further, so will the sanctions. Can you walk us through that process at all? It seems like the U.S. is now breaking its sanctions package into chunks, whereas the expectation had been that it would come all at once.
Yeah, well, look, today's package is a severe action. I walked through the elements of it with Nord Stream, the financial sanctions, sovereign debt, and the elites. Number two, it's just the beginning. This was the beginning of an invasion. This is just the beginning of our response. But number three, and this really gets to your question, I think, most fundamentally, no one should think that it's our goal to max out on sanctions. Sanctions are not an end to themselves. They serve a higher purpose. And that purpose is to deter and prevent. They're meant to prevent and deter a large-scale invasion of Ukraine that could involve the seizure of major cities, including Kyiv. They're meant to prevent large-scale human suffering that could involve tens of thousands of casualties in a conflict. And they're meant to prevent the installation of a puppet government controlled by Moscow that subjugates the will of Ukraine and prevents the people of Ukraine from choosing their own destiny and setting their own course. That's what this is all about.
What's it going to take to target Putin directly?
I'm not going to telegraph exactly what it would take and under what circumstances that would occur, but no option is off the table, as the president
said. The president said today this is the most dangerous moment in European security in a generation. So if not today, when? What?
Look, as I say, we mounted a very significant response today. We can escalate that response further. There are a number of actions we can take using financial sanctions, export controls, fortifying our eastern flank, helping Ukraine defend itself, helping each other deal with the costs and consequences of Russia's invasion, and most importantly, having a shared confidence among allies in our way of life, our economic model, our political model. If Russia wants to sequester itself from Western technology, the Western economy, and from Western financial markets, that is a bad strategic choice for Russia. But we're going to step up in solidarity to advance our values and principles.
Thanks. You mentioned that sanctions are meant to deter and prevent, but the fact of the matter is the sanctions you're announcing today and announced last night did not deter or prevent Russia's actions yesterday and over the weekend. What gives you any confidence that the remaining sanctions that haven't been imposed yet can deter or prevent a further Russian invasion and aggression in Ukraine?
Well, look, it's day one, and President Putin has choices to make. We have choices to make. Our job is to manage risks and to impose consequences for a further escalation of this conflict by President Putin. We can do that through financial sanctions. We can do that through export controls. We can do that through fortifying NATO's eastern flank. We can do that through providing defensive assistance to Ukraine. We can do that by being prepared for any energy market impact that occurs from Russia's choices. Those are the choices that are within our disposal. And let me just take a step back and talk about sanctions. You know, we have principles that matter in terms of how we design a sanctions package. They need to be powerful enough to demonstrate our resolve and the capacity to impose overwhelming costs. They should be calibrated such that we can maximize coordination with our allies and partners. They should maintain flexibility so we can escalate or de-escalate depending on what Putin does. They should be responsible.
It sort of seems like what's being said, if you read between the lines, is if we do everything right away and Putin knows that's it, then he knows we can't do any more. So it seems to be you want to leave yourself some headroom in some sense.
Simon, you got a question last week, so we're just trying to diversify it a little bit.
I just wanted to clarify.
Simon, can you let Ouija ask a question? Thank you. Go ahead, Ouija.
Friend of the show, Ouija.
I know that you just talked about all the actions that you're taking to counter any oil shortages that might drive up gas prices. But today, the president himself was very blunt about how they could impact Americans. So can you just give us a sense of when Americans might feel a difference when they fill up their gas tanks? And then secondly, to follow up
No, don't do that.
Zeke was just asking, both you and the president said today that these sanctions will be in response, will be if Putin escalates, you will escalate. So that sounds like they are going to be in response now and not meant to deter. So do you still view them as being a deterrence, or are they just a punishment at this point?
Yeah, so the first question on energy markets and the impact of our actions and when they'll take effect in markets. Look, again, I don't want to go into specifics, but there are actions that energy consumers can take with their strategic reserves. There are actions that energy producers can take in terms of their spare capacity. There are actions that energy producers can undertake to increase their production of energy in the current circumstance. And I'm not going to give you a timeline, but the collective power of those actions and all the other tools and authorities that are at our disposal, plus diplomatic maneuvers that are at our disposal, collectively, we think will be effective in bringing down the price of gas and the price of oil.
You will come back, I promise, and I promise
All
it
right.
will not be too late for his meeting.
So that's Deputy National Security Advisor Dilip Singh, and now we will hear from Jen Psaki.
Questions from Dilip. We will have him back, and we will make him available in other capacities as well to all of you. I have one very unrelated but still very important item for you at the top, and then we'll get back to our discussion. Today in Arizona, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland announced the Interior Department's plan to fulfill settlements of Indian water rights claims using historic funding from President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law.
Yeah, I do think it's legitimate to say, okay, what we've done is both a punishment for what Putin already did and a signal that if he does more, we will do more. Like, whether it works or not, it's not absurd that you could say it's both.
Back from the tribal consultations, the department will allocate $1.7 billion this year alone from the infrastructure law to enacted settlements that have outstanding federal payments necessary to complete their terms. With that, Zeke, why don't you kick us off, and we will get around to as many people as possible, and I realize it's already late. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. How do you walk us through the events of the last 24 hours? Last night, a senior administration official on a background call with reporters briefed them on the administration's response and said that Russia's occupied these regions since 2014, and that Russian troops moving into the Donbass would not itself be a new step, and didn't use the word invasion. This morning, Deputy National Security Advisor said invasion. The president is using invasion. What changed in the last 24 hours? What did you see on the ground that changed the U.S. government's assessment of what is actually happening in Eastern Ukraine?
Sure. Well, I'm not going to, I know this isn't exactly what you're asking, but just to set the precedent here, I'm not going to be confirming military movements from the podium now or at any point, probably.
Ever.
But what I can tell you is what we looked at is the events of the last less than 24 hours, Zeke, right? And what we have seen is President Putin setting up a rationale to take more territory by force. What we're basing that on, including the comments of the Deputy National Security Advisor this morning, and then the president's comments later in the afternoon, is a couple of things. One, Vladimir Putin announced yesterday that he was basically planning to carve out a chunk of Ukraine by recognizing 2 regions of Ukraine as independent. He brazenly asserted these regions are no longer part of Ukrainian sovereign territory. Last night, he authorized Russian forces to deploy into these regions. Today, he sought authorization from the Duma for the Russian military to use force outside of Russian territory. And today, he asserted that these regions actually extend deeper into Ukraine, claiming larger areas currently under jurisdiction of the Ukrainian government. So what we're seeing there, and as for anybody who read or paid attention to his lengthy speech last night, is the rationale to go much further. That is what we are also watching very closely. And for this combination of reasons, we see this as the beginning of a further invasion of Ukraine. But we look at and we assess over the course of a short period of time.
But right now, could you say whether or not the U.S. government believes that there's been additional deployments of Russian forces, active forces, across the border into Ukraine? They've been there for years, but additional forces?
I'm not going to get into military assessments of military movements from here.
And then on a separate topic, the president, and Julie talked about this as well, warned Americans in the last several weeks that they should be prepared to bear the cost of standing up for Ukraine's sovereignty. There's been a lot of conversation about this, and I was hoping you could maybe speak to clarify this a little bit. Why should Americans, feel that they have to? That is a cost that they should have to bear, and that should affect their lives. And how much should they be prepared for this, geopolitical crisis to impact their day-to-day living?
Well, I think what hopefully the American people who are tuning into this or have been tuning into this will see is that the President of the United States and his entire national security apparatus have been rallying the world and standing up against the efforts of Russia to invade and carve out a chunk of another country for their own. And that is, the world is standing with the United States against the actions of President Putin. Now, why does that matter? I realize that's what you're asking me. Why does that matter to the American people? That should matter because that is a fundamental value that we as a country stand up for, and we stand up against that type of action. That goes back to World War II, and we have repeatedly throughout history been leaders in the world in rallying support for any efforts to seize territory from another country. When the president spoke to the American people last week, it was very important to him to be very direct and clear and straightforward with them about what this could mean as we looked to what the impact of an invasion could mean and also what the impact of sanctions could mean. And the fact that standing up for values is not without cost, including in this case, including potentially in this scenario. Now, as Dilip just conveyed, what the president has said to his national security team is he wants to leave no stone unturned. He wants them to take every step possible to tap into the resources of global suppliers, to present to him any option that will reduce the impact on the American people. And even as he's looking at sanctions, he is taking that into account. But this is about standing up for American values and he wanted to make clear to them what impact that could have. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Given what Secretary Blinken just announced about his meeting with Lavrov on Thursday, is a summit between the president and Putin out of the question now?
Well, we're never going to completely close the door to diplomacy, and I don't think the Secretary of State did that either. But just to build on what he just said, diplomacy can't succeed unless Russia changes course. And as he said, it wouldn't be appropriate for him to have a meeting with his counterpart at this point in time, Foreign Minister Lavrov. And it was always intended that any engagement with President Putin would follow that. So at this point, that is certainly not in the plans.
And what would it take to get that conversation back to the table, to reconsider a meeting between the two leaders?
Well, de-escalation. That's what it would take.
How do you define that?
De-escalation means moving troops. It means de-escalating from what the steps they continue to take on a daily basis appear to be.
And then a second topic quickly.
Yeah.
How many Supreme Court nominees has the president interviewed by this point?
That was a wink. I appreciate your question. I understand, Weijia, why you're asking. We are, of course, a very short period of time away from the end of the month of February. The president has not made a decision about who he's going to nominate, but I'm still not going to get into details about the internal process. More to tell soon. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Jen. The president said in the spring that Pentagon generals had briefed him that the greatest threat facing America is global warming. Is that still the assessment now that we are facing down a potential cyber war with Russia?
Well, let me first say there is no, we are always prepared for any threat that any outside entity or country poses to the United States that relates to cyber or anything else. There is no current pending threat as it relates to cyber. In terms of the threats you're touching on, that was a briefing from the military, so I'd point you to them.
And so as far as anybody watching who's seen the coverage, it's very, at times, distressing images of Russian military movements. The number one threat facing the country right now remains global warming.
Well, Peter, I think it's important, as we're all educating the public here, to convey and reiterate the president has no intention of sending U.S. troops into Ukraine to fight in Ukraine. What we are doing is we are abiding by our obligations to our NATO allies and partners to ensure that they have the support and the resources that they need. And that is our obligation as the United States.
Okay, and why do you guys think that sanctions are going to stop Putin if his goal ultimately is to redraw the map so it looks like it did 70 or 80 years ago. What sanction is going to stop them from doing that?
Well, I think just to kind of reiterate maybe something you touched on there, for anyone who watched his speech last night, what he made clear in that speech is that he doesn't even necessarily or doesn't recognize the independence of Ukraine as a country. And that certainly gives us an indication of where his intentions are at this point in time. Sanctions can be a powerful tool. They have been in a lot of moments throughout history, and what we view them as or how we're viewing them, as we're starting high, as Dilip just conveyed here, in terms of the significance and the severity of the sanctions that were announced today. Yes, our intention is to have a deterrent effect, and there
So
are
cringy.
what they have done to date is completely unacceptable. There's certainly far worse that could happen. What we want to do is prevent a large-scale invasion, death and destruction across Ukraine, devastation to the Ukrainian people, and that what happens with sanctions is they work over time. They're not an end. They're not intended to max out at the beginning. They're long-lasting and sustainable, and they're intended to squeeze. But if you look at what is happening now, what President Putin has stated as his intention is he wants to divide NATO. The opposite of that has happened, Peter. He also wanted a geopolitical project, Nord Stream 2, to go forward. That has not happened. He wants to make sure there is a vibrant economy for the Russian people. They're not on that track. So his intentions and his objectives are not playing out.
But so I guess to follow up on that, the president said before he got here that Putin knows if I am president of the United States, his days of tyranny and trying to intimidate the United States and those in Eastern Europe are over. It's 2.5 years later. He is intimidating the United States and those in Eastern Europe. What happened?
I'd hardly put it that way. I would look at it actually from the prism of the United States, and President Biden has rallied the world, rallied Europe to stand up against the efforts and the actions of President Putin. And we've laid out very clearly exactly
$4 gas, $5 gas, however how you guys think it's going to go, something like that.
Remember that the gas prices were higher under Trump.
President Putin, and I think the evidence of that doesn't exist. Go ahead, Kristen.
So, he wants to make it seem silly to say that global warming is the greatest threat we face when there are tanks going from Russia into Ukraine. This is my segment yesterday about how this entire media space is just filled with nuttiness. We can at the same time recognize if global warming, climate change isn't controlled, famine and natural disasters could kill hundreds of millions, right? So you can hold that in your head. Long term, we got to control it, or famine and all these things could kill hundreds of millions. And right now, when it comes to militaries, this is an aggressive act by Putin. A normal person could understand that. But he wants to go, how can you see a tank and be like, global warming's the number one problem? It's a stupid question for stupid viewers.
Continue to be escalatory. And also, if we do all the sanctions now, what is the deterrent effect or impact of preventing him to take further action? That is what the conversation we've been in with the global community, and that is how we've been approaching it to date.
Senator Lindsey Graham says President Biden is missing the moment. Does he run the risk of being too cautious here with this tranche approach?
In what capacity is he missing the moment? Did Senator Graham say?
I'll read you the entire
Okay, go ahead.
This is a critical moment in history. President Biden is not seizing the moment to sanctions.
Someone got a mic on her?
Did he say that before or after we announced the sanctions?
Saying this consistently.
Well, look, I think it's an important question because what the president announced was the sanctioning of two enormous financial institutions that is essentially going to make it more difficult for people close to President Putin and in the Russian elite to do business. And this is just the beginning.
When do you think they'll start to feel the impact? When will they feel the bite?
Well, they're going to be implemented immediately. So obviously it takes some time, but our effort and our focus is on implementing them immediately.
And going back to President Biden's statement that he wants to mitigate the impact on Americans, can you tell Americans how much pain will they feel with this first tranche?
Well, I think what we're looking at here, Kristen, is, of course, the impact on natural gas producers primarily is in Europe, and we're working to help them too, but also on the oil markets. And obviously, there are many additional steps that President Putin could take, and what we're seeing is that he has every intention of taking. So I can't give you a projection of that. Some of it depends on what the actions are.
I think Americans will feel the impact in the coming weeks of these surround?
Again, it really depends on what the steps are. What was announced today was significant sanctions on Russian elite and on financial institutions there. The people who will be largely impacted are in Russia on those.
If I could just try one more. SWIFT, not in this initial rollout.
Not in the initial tranche, but remains on the table.
Will it be in the next rollout if there needs to be another rollout?
I can't give you a prediction of that, but again, we have a range of options that remain on the table. Significant that would have a significant and devastating impact on the Russian economy. We've already seen in the Russian economy the impact on inflation there and on the markets there of the expectation of these sanctions. But all of those options remain on the table, and I can't make a prediction of what's next. Go ahead.
The president today used words like bizarre and twisted to describe Putin's remarks. Does the administration believe on what they saw in this speech yesterday, or in the last 24 hours, if you will, that Putin has shown some kind of change in his state of mind and his demeanor?
Seems unhinged.
I wouldn't say we'd characterize it that way, Cecilia. I mean, if you, for those of you who read or watched his speech last night, which was rife with historical inaccuracy, of course, he made clear that he does not view Ukraine, not just the areas.
Putin was very strangely rambling and seemed kind of disconnected from reality. He seemed sort of dazed.
That by providing a lot of revisionist history details that are not aligned with what has happened over the last few decades. Now, we've seen some of that rhetoric if you look back to 2008 and even before then, but it is indicative of of his own belief that he has the right that Russia, and he has the right to take the territory, to claim territory from another country, and we just don't agree with that, obviously.
If sanctions don't work, then what? What else is in the tool belt at the president's disposal at this point?
Well, sanctions can take a number of formats, right? Export controls is certainly one of them. There's many more sanctions that we have at our disposal. The SWIFT system is obviously significant, not in the first tranche, but there's a range of options that remain on the table for sanctions. And again, as Dilip conveyed, but I think this is an important component to know, is that they're not intended to have an impact on the harshest impact on the first day. They're planned or they're designed to have a squeezing impact over the course of time, and we have many more escalatory steps that we could take.
Do you have specific agreements with countries, exporters, to ensure Europe has a steady supply of gas, or is that still a work in progress?
I certainly understand your question. As Dilip said, it is a very sensitive time in the process right now, but what we're doing right now is talking both to major natural gas producers to understand their capacity and willingness to surge natural gas output, which of course is a regional issue that would have an impact in Europe, and also talking, as he said, to a range of producers.
People in the chat, who has gas, electric versus oil for home heating? I'm curious.
Just can't outline any more details on it from here.
The impact on the American public, you mean specifically Americans should expect higher gasoline prices?
Yeah, energy prices, exactly. That's what we want the American public to be aware is a possibility.
Are you announcing more oligarchs tomorrow? Is that the plan?
I don't have anything to preview for you at this point in time, but I can certainly check if there's another tranche coming tomorrow. Absolutely, go ahead.
And given that the president stressed today that diplomacy is still available, but now the Blinken-Lavrov meeting is off, you just said this future.
A lot more people with electric heat than I would have guessed. Now, if you have electric heat, do you have old school electric baseboards, or do you have new electric heat pumps?
Dealing with Russia?
Well, first, the door to diplomacy still remains open, and it just, as I think our Secretary of State conveyed, it isn't the appropriate time as Russia is taking escalatory steps and preparing to invade for him to meet with the foreign minister. And it had always been the intention that any engagement with President Putin would be discussed there and potentially follow there, but there were never any specific plans or timeline really in the works for that. So it was really going to be discussed at that meeting. What diplomacy looks like, one, we're going to continue to engage with our European partners, of course, and we will continue to remain open to having diplomatic conversations if and when they de-escalate.
Diplomatic conversations, so certainly between President Biden and President Putin.
Well, of
in
course,
the future?
that remains an option. And as we said, I think over the course of the last few days, he's always going to be open to having leader-to-leader conversations. But this isn't the time to do it when, and we said this at the time as well, when President Putin is overseeing the invasion of a sovereign country.
And just quickly, what is the U.S. assessment right now of Russian invasion into Kyiv? Is that considered an immediate danger right now?
Yikes.
It is considered, I'm not going to give you a timeline, but it's considered a real possibility, yes. Go ahead.
Thanks. For weeks, Jake Sullivan and other top officials have said that the administration, the White House, has learned the lessons of 2014, and you will enact, in sanctions, you will enact start high and stay high rather than gradually escalate. Mm-hmm. As you talk about the chunks and different tranches, it seems you're doing the opposite. Why is that the approach that you're taking?
Not true, actually. We actually didn't sanction these type of financial institutions back in 2014, and it took several weeks to sanction these type of institutions.
But more in terms of the theory of the case, that instead of doing it in pieces where you start and then continue to add on the lessons that Jake and others have signaled, was that you start high and stay high instead of doing it more piecemeal.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. So the announcement that was made today about these financial institutions is more significant than what was done in 2014. And we would only build further from here. So that is starting high and staying high. Go ahead.
What Russian actions would trigger the fullest extent of U.S. sanctions?
Man, it's a lot of the same question over and over again. It really is.
Obviously, we have a range of options at our disposal. They're all remain on the table. And
I would love for someone to say, is the administration comfortable with the reality that we are here fighting a war in all but name only with everything other than drones and boots on the ground? We're doing everything else. It's essentially a proxy war.
Might look like.
I can't go into more specifics, just a range of options are on the table, and obviously export control actions would have a significant additional impact on the economy there. In terms of, tell me your first part of your question again?
Oh, yeah, just is the administration confident that sanctions and export controls can deter Putin? Are they enough?
Part of what sanctions are is they're intended to be a deterrent, but they are also intended to have a squeezing significant impact on the economy that is felt over a sustainable period of time that makes it more difficult to continue those behaviors and those actions. They're not intended or designed to be an end when they're initially announced. So those are the range of options we have at our disposal, and there will continue to be a growing impact. Go ahead.
Thanks. The president said last week that he was hoping to maybe work with Congress on some sort of proposal to address energy prices. Is that still on the table, or is this focus now on sort of diplomacy with producers and consumers?
All is on the table.
And what might that look like?
Discussions with Congress?
Yeah, would it be in the form of legislation to lower prices? I mean, what kind of policies is
that? Is an option, but I don't have anything to detail for you at this point in time.
Another subject, the U.S. and several countries are close to reaching a nuclear deal with Iran. What's the likelihood of an agreement, this week in your view? And would the U.S. agree to a deal that does not include the release of U.S. and British prisoners held by Iran?
Well, let me start with your second question, because this isn't a really important one. But the discussions on unjustly detained and innocent Americans remain separate from the JCPOA talks. As Special Envoy Malley has reiterated, it's very hard for us to imagine getting back into the nuclear deal or agreeing to kind of a new iteration of the deal, to the point of your question, while 4 innocent Americans and others are being held hostage by Iran. It's really a matter of urgency to bring the detainees home. We want it to be resolved immediately, but is happening through a separate channel, those conversations. In terms of the status of the JCPOA talks, we have made substantial progress, or substantial progress has been made over the last week or so, and is continuing to be made. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, and so until then, I'm not going to give you a rosy assessment, but it is, of course, good that substantial progress has been made. If Iran shows seriousness, we believe we can and should reach an understanding on mutual return to full implementation of the JCPOA.
And just real quick, is the president concerned at all about the convoy of truckers that's making its way to Washington, and has he taken any sort of steps to protect that?
Yes, we've actually been monitoring this closely. The Department of Homeland Security and the administration are tracking reports of a potential convoy that may be planning to travel to several U.S. cities, including Washington, D.C. We have been working, including from Dr. Liz Sherwood-Randall here, as well as our Homeland Security Department, closely with our federal, state, and local partners to continuously assess the threat environment and keep our communities safe. And our efforts include enhanced intelligence sharing, a critical incident response plan for the U.S. Capitol, a regional security assessment, and a simulation experiment that developed data-driven recommendations to bolster regional security. So we are closely monitoring, closely watching, and working with state and local authorities. Let me go ahead.
Great. First, just want to thank everybody. I know it's late who are limiting our questions so that more people can.
Yes, sure.
So I appreciate that.
And if anybody needs to go for a hit or anything, nobody will take it personally. I know some people have. Go ahead.
So one question, of course, on Ukraine, first of all. Dilip said just now that today's sanction package is, quote, just the beginning of it. Does that mean if nothing changes, you expect more sanctions, or what does that mean, just the beginning of it?
It means we have a range of additional options that we have the ability to take. And if President Putin continues to escalate, so will we.
And on looking to the State of the Union, when was the last time President Biden spoke to a member of Congress about any item in the Build Back Better agenda?
He has a range of conversations all the time, but I'm not going to detail the timeline of those for you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. When can we expect a more detailed explanation from the White House about how it would plan to bring down energy prices?
Well, I think as Dilip just conveyed, a lot of what's happening right now is sensitive. It includes conversations with foreign
A better answer would be the White House can do very little about energy prices.
Continuing to have with Congress and others about what steps may be at our disposal, and the president is continuing to consider options. So I expect we'll have more to tell you when any decisions are made.
And given what we have heard publicly from the Russians in the last several days, what level of concern does the White House have that the conflict could spill over out of Ukraine and into some of the other nations that the U.S. has vowed to protect militarily and are part of NATO?
Well, without making any prediction of that, what I can tell you is that one of the steps we've taken, including an announcement that the Department of Defense made today about plussing up of an additional 800 personnel to the Baltic region from Italy, is that we take our commitments to our NATO allies and partners seriously, and we are going to continue to take steps to plus up their support and ensure that they know that they have the backing of the United States. But I'm not going to make any other predictions of that. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot. The NSC is Brett McGurk.
That was a little scary. Go ahead.
NSC's Brett McGurk and State Department's Amos Hochstein. I hope I didn't butcher that too much.
But it's
Hochstein.
okay.
Thank
Yes.
you. I just wanted to ask, what concrete assurances were they able to secure on managing potential market pressures from Saudi Arabia?
I certainly understand the question. We did confirm that they went on a trip and they discussed a range of issues, including Yemen, but also including steps we can all take to coordinate and reduce the impact on the global market on oil. But I can't detail anything further from here.
If one of the objectives is not to disrupt global energy flows, and energy prices are high and rising, how can Russia's bottom line really be hurt if you don't disrupt global energy flows?
Well, I think Russia's bottom line can be hurt in a lot of ways, including the range of sanctions we've already announced today and additional sets of sanctions that we have at our disposal should they choose, whether it's sanctioning additional individuals or taking more...
There's more and more people in the chat who seem to be aware that there is one article that I am aware of that claims Queen Elizabeth has died. It is being refuted. And at this time, it is one article and it's being refuted that she is dead. So that's, that's all I know.
All assessing what steps we can take that will have a crippling impact on them while reducing the impact on the American public. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I'm just trying to get a better idea of what the administration deems to be an escalation on the part of Russia.
Again, it is being denied. It is one article from a website I'm unfamiliar with making the claim. It has not been announced in any formal way, and it is being refuted.
Areas of Ukraine, or would it be the continued deployment of forces?
I'm not reporting that the Queen is dead. I'm reporting that the rumor is being denied as of right now.
As you have seen, hopefully, as Russia has taken any escalatory steps, we have taken escalatory steps on our end in the form of sanctions. And so I'm not going to outline for you if this, then, but I think if for those of you, again, who watched the speech last night, President Putin attacked Ukraine's right to exist. He has explicitly threatened war unless his extreme demands were met. He gave an entire speech selling a war to the Russian people. Our expectation, and we hope we are wrong, is that he will continue to take escalatory actions and further invade the country, and we will take additional steps in response.
Is the administration preparing any sort of measures for Ukrainians already in the United States, such as TPS or any other sort of immigration protections for those who might not want to go back?
Sure, I don't. Obviously, those decisions or assessments are made by the Department of Homeland Security. I can't make a prediction of that at this point in time. Obviously, what we are doing on the ground is trying to provide a range of economic, humanitarian, and security assistance to the Ukrainian government. I understand you're asking about people who are here, and obviously, we are preparing for the potential for major humanitarian outflows that could go into Europe and have a range of needs. And so that is also something we are closely tracking. We are also poised to increase our support to the people of Ukraine should additional humanitarian needs arise. Our response would be based on assessment of the needs, our partners' emergency appeals, in coordination with our European allies and partners. But we are assessing the humanitarian situation on the ground very closely, and we're going to continue to engage with allies and partners about any humanitarian needs that escalate and refugee outflows if they are to continue to occur.
Given we're getting close to the deadline, are SCOTUS interviews done at this point? I know it's all in process, and
I know,
but are they done at this point?
We already didn't answer
that. The
that.
process will soon be over, so that's the good news. I'm not going to detail the status, but I can tell you that the president has not made a decision yet, but we remain on track for him to make a decision and make an announcement before the end of the month. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I know you said you didn't like military questions too much, but...
No, I love military questions. I'm just not going to outline military movements from here.
Okay, fine. Because one kind of salient aspect of this whole thing has been actually the openness of the US in giving military details about what the Russians are up to. So I'm wondering if you can go a little further with that. It seems important that people don't really understand, like, these, the so-called peacekeepers, like, how many are there? Are they in Donbass now? Is it a handful of people? Is it a few guys with, like, jeeps? Or is it tons of tanks, missiles? Like, I don't think Americans really have a good idea of what it is, what this invasion actually consists of.
Sure, and I appreciate...
And another question would be, there's obviously no US trainers in Ukraine anymore. But will this military training relationship continue in a third country?
Sure. On the second, I would point you to the Department of Defense, who's best equipped to answer that question. On the first, it's a really important one. I think it's important for the American public who may be just tuning in to know that there has been a Russian military presence in Ukraine since back to 2014, which they never admitted, they never acknowledged. In some ways, they've only recently acknowledged. Back in 2014 and in the years after, we called them the Little Green Men because they were not in Russian military uniform. Now we know that they are all over eastern Ukraine, and they are, not in uniform, they are behaving just like Russian military would be behaving. So that is something, I can't give you a number or specifics from here because I can't get into intelligence, but it is important for the American people to know that regardless of whether they're in uniform or not, they've been there since 2014, they are representing the Russian government, they are separatists we probably should stop calling them peacekeepers because they are certainly not that, who are, helping to lay the predicate for war. And that is what the purpose of a lot of them is there for.
Okay, did anything change in the last 24 hours? I think that's really the question.
Yes, I'm not gonna be able to give you any additional assessment of that at this point in time from here. But I understand your question. We'll continue to work to give you more. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Two quick questions on Nord Stream 2. The first is, the deputy director just said that stopping Nord Stream 2 relieved Europe of a geostrategic chokehold that Russia would have had on them. So if Nord Stream 2 going online was such a threat, why in May did the president waive sanctions on the company and the chief executive behind it? And my second question is there a concern that Nord Stream 2, if Russia were to make concessions or retreat in some way, that might open up the door to Nord Stream 2 going back online? Or is it your understanding that it is dead no matter what Russia does?
Well, I would first say that, the president has never been a supporter of Nord Stream 2. We've always criticized it as a project that we didn't support. We took a range of steps and sanctions, including sanctions, to make that very clear. What the announcement made by the German chancellor today was not by accident. It was at the conclusion of a range of diplomatic engagement and efforts by the president and members of our national security team in unity from the Europeans about the fact that this could not move forward. We've never felt, the president didn't feel, that issuing preemptive sanctions on that was the right step to take. But look where we are. Nord Stream 2 is not moving forward. And by the way, it hasn't been operational anyway. So, that's a fact. It's not moving forward at this point in time. In terms of the future, we've never felt it was a good project. We've been clear about that. And that assessment, I don't expect would change in the future. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Does the White House have any reaction to former President Trump calling Putin's move yesterday genius and smart?
Yes.
Well, as a matter of policy,
there you go.
We try not to take advice from anyone who praises President Putin and his military strategy, which I believe is what happened there, expresses an openness to lifting sanctions about the seizing of territory in Crimea, or at any point in time told leaders of the G7 that Crimea is a part of Russia, regardless if they are a former president. So there's a bit of a different tactic, a bit of a different approach, and that's probably why President Biden and not his predecessor was able to rally the world and the global community in taking steps against Russia's aggression.
Is there any fear that statements like that could turn support for Ukraine into a more partisan issue among the U.S. public?
By the former president? I think that is up to members of the Republican Party to make the decision, to make the determination. There has a long history, decades of history, which President Biden was a part of when he was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, of standing up to the efforts of any country to seize the territory of another country, standing up for efforts by the United States to rally global support against inappropriate and illegal actions by another country. There's a long history of that, not in a partisan way.
Trump's calling it a perfect invasion.
Choice is up to Republicans to determine. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I've got two questions quickly. The administration rolled out a list of sanctions against Russian oligarchs and elites. My question is, are any of them being sanctioned for the first time, or are these sort of repeat bad offenders?
That's a good question. I'm sure we can get you a breakdown of that. I believe some of them are new, and certainly the banks are new, but let us get you a more specific breakdown of that.
My second question is, the last time Jake Sullivan was here, he said that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would lead to U.S. sanctions, warning that would necessarily make Moscow more beholden to Beijing. Obviously, both of those foreign powers aren't exactly the most friendly to us. So is the administration taking any steps or issuing any warnings to keep those geopolitical foes from aligning together and marching in lockstep?
Well, long before the events of the last few months, we saw China and Russia moving closer together in some capacity. But right now, as we're looking at the actions of President Putin and as we're preparing for him to further invade Ukraine, to unfortunately put forward death and destruction on the country and the people of Ukraine, it's really a question for China on whether they look at that and think that's acceptable behavior. So I think you saw that our Secretary of State had a conversation with his counterpart in the last 24 or 48 hours, and we will certainly remain and continue to engage. But I think it's about looking at where the global community is in this moment and determining where you want to stand. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I wanted to ask about rapid COVID tests. Do you have an update at this point on how many you've shipped and how many you've under contract?
I believe we do, but I'm going to have to get that to you after the briefing. We have, let me get that to you after the briefing because I think we have some updated numbers on that. I think we're going to have to wrap up shortly here. Go ahead in the back.
Thank you, Jen. I'm sorry I had to step out.
It's okay.
For a live shot for a moment, but so if somebody asked this question, I'm sorry. But I would like to clarify what Dalip said at the beginning. He said that Nord Stream 2 will go to waste now. So do you have assurance from Germany that it's the decision to cancel the project is final, or it's still reversible?
Well, I would really, I don't have anything to build on beyond what the strong statements and the strong comments of the Chancellor this morning and the President's own statements about how it would not move forward. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
So there is the press briefing from Jen Psaki. We will see what the latest is over on CNN. A number of different questions and ideas and different things coming in from different people. It is completely plausible that Putin won't do anything else for a couple of weeks to let the heat die down and then sort of do the next thing. We really just don't know at this time what he has planned. Things calm in Maidan Square in Kyiv. We are monitoring the latest. There's a very interesting Reddit Live where you can continue to see what is being said and different elements that are being included there, but a lot of different things going on and a lot of different things to track. I want to say thank you to Donnell Bullock, who just signed up on my website using the coupon code Please Don't War. And on that basis, because we are at 49, whoever is number 50, you get a free item from my online store. We've got hoodies, we've got t-shirts, hats, coffee mugs, tea mugs, water mugs, juice mugs. It's really all the same mug. I guess just you can put whatever you want in it. Whoever is number 50 at joinpacman.com, we are at 49. You will get a free item from the store shipped anywhere in the world where we can deliver. We probably can't get it to North Korea. There's probably some remote areas of the world we can't get it to. But we will do our absolute best to get it to you absolutely wherever you are, which is very, very important. AVR Drum says, is it time to start asking and renewing discussions on Build Back Better? Build Back Better is feeling very dead, very, very dead. But obviously, I would love to see that reverse. But it's not clear to me that is going to happen. Many streams this. Oh, hold on. Let's see what's going on here.
More U.S. forces and military equipment into key positions in Europe as he confirms that Russia is beginning an invasion of Ukraine. We're joined now by CNN military analyst, retired Major General James Spider Marks.
Oh, no,
General,
not Marks.
Walk our viewers through the region right now that's considered the front lines where Putin is ordering Russian troops to move in.
When they pull out General Marks, when they pull out Spider Marks and put up these maps, you know someone's clamoring for war. That's for damn sure. Let's take it all in.
This is the Donbas region. Now, specifically, what was just annexed officially in Putin's eyes is this area right here. And this is the line of separation that has been in place for close to 8 years.
Yeah, that line was
Russia
on the map
has
already.
had forces in this area for 8 years supporting the separatists as they try to separate from Kiev. What's most important, however, and what we're talking about now is what happens in the greater Donbas. Is Putin ready to move forward? Now, we have some video that shows the movement of forces, logistics, self-propelled artillery, infantry fighting vehicles, and all these videos.
I don't think I want to do the military porn stuff right now. I do want to say thanks to Crispin Driver Schroeder, who is new member number 50 today. Crispin, you get a free item from my online store. Please email info@davidpacman.com to claim it. Also want to say thanks to Joshua Bubis and Edward Stewart for signing up on my website, numbers 51 and 52. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me. We heard from Blinken. We heard from Psaki. We heard from Biden. We heard from everybody. I guess there's a war, and it's not looking great right now. We will be back, I'm sure, tomorrow. Thursday, CPAC starts. We'll be streaming Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Tuesday, we will then have Biden's State of the Union. It is a lot is going on, but we will be back, and appreciate everybody joining me.